When I hear people talking about what's the best video game console ever made, they mention the likes of the PS2, the N64, the SNES, the Xbox 360. No, they don't. But they never seem to mention the GameCube. I mean, okay, it didn't sell as well as Nintendo would have liked, but ye gods, it had some amazing games.
And that's a strange thing with the GameCube. You look at its library and you have to put on sunglasses because everything's just so sparkly and shiny. But it sold less copies than the giant paperweight that Microsoft were marketing at the time, and nearly 7 times less copies than the PS2. Whether it's because it focused too much on a younger and therefore smaller market, or because, let's be honest, it looked a little stupid compared to its rivals, but its games far outlive its own legacy. And they do a damn good job too. The transition from the N64 to GameCube was something that needed to be almost exaggerated wherever possible. And you can see just how far some series came in the space of one console generation. The console itself won't go down in history as one of the best items to come out of Nintendo, but boy, some of those games will. And I've got to pick the best 5. Don't envy me. Oh, you just know that we're starting out strong and potentially controversial when we're sticking the GameCube era equivalent of Super Mario Galaxy and Super Mario 64 at only number 5. The next greatest title for everyone's favourite Italian plumber, involving a tropical island, lots of paint and a Wharton cannon backpack thing. And yet somehow, people didn't take to this straight away.
Super Mario Sunshine is a flawed game. You don't have to try too hard to find glitches, and in some places, the glitches will make the level a lot harder than it would be otherwise. There was indifferent reactions to things like voice acting, and the entire concept of Mario having this robotic water pump friend to go through the game with. And it didn't initially win many fans, but you know what? Fuck 'em.
Super Mario Sunshine, for all its faults and decisions that you may or may not agree with, is one of the most entertaining games I've ever played. With one of the smoothest physics engines I've ever experienced, you can fly through this game, leaping about all over the place, collecting shine sprites in each of the different locations in the game. Maybe you're not feeling this sunny beach level. Then off you go to the harbour level, or the amusement park level, or even the hotel beach level, set against a constant sunset backdrop. Which is my favourite! And let's say that you're still hell-bent on playing a Mario game without this Wharton cannon safety net. That you want to feel the thrill of hurtling towards a pit without anything to save you. Lucky for you that Super Mario Sunshine takes some time out to remind you why FLUDD is a beautiful thing, and just how exposed you are without it. These secret levels don't take long to get stupid. But hey, you asked for it, might as well go with it. A rule I didn't mention until now because it's only just become relevant is only taking games that started on the GameCube. Better hardware does give you an opportunity to tweak the finer aspects of your game, but you can't just ignore where it came from for a video like this. And remarkably, it puts me in a position where I can put Resident Evil 4 on this list without thinking twice. Didn't see that coming, did you?
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the GameCube version of Resi 4 is the best version out there, because honestly I prefer the PC and the Wii version for just sort of more intuitive shooting controls. But it is weird to say that one of the most influential third-person shooters ever made, one of the most important games of the last decade, started on the GameCube.
Never before has the video game world seen such a beautifully constructed, expertly crafted suicide note. I mean, Resident Evil 4 is a great game if you ignore the ruthless quick-time events, the awkward change of tone halfway through the game, and literally everything involved with Ashley Graham, but it drifted away from the horror style that defined the earlier games in the series. What you end up with is an exciting, sometimes campy action game that proved to be the inspiration for huge games, ranging from Dead Space and the Batman Arkham series to Grand Theft Auto. Good GameCube game? Yeah, kinda. But it's not exactly the best version you could be playing. It's hard to imagine that there was a time when a 3D Metroid game was a terrible idea. Nintendo tried to piece something together for the N64 but couldn't settle on any solid plans for it. There was a fear that they could never match the standard set by Super Metroid, that a 3D Metroid game would feel awkward to control. And while that may sound a bit bleak, it meant that Nintendo and Retro Studios didn't just throw up some code and call it a Metroid game. They waited, thought about it a bit more, and came up with something truly special. Did they know, when they called it Metroid Prime, that they had just made the quintessential first-person adventure game with shooter elements? Like if Doom was a bit smarter and less noisy. You can't really classify it as a first-person shooter because of how much emphasis is put towards exploring these huge worlds, but there's still some elements taken from your standard shooty game. Except you're doing it as one of the most iconic female game characters in history, in her first and arguably best 3D outing, using all manner of different weapons to get around, and using the morph ball in what are now unbelievably immersive experiences. So, not your standard shooty game then.
Moving to a 3D perspective like a lot of other games that made that transition does mean that you end up with a much more grand adventure. You have short cutscenes that happen before important battles. It means that Samus's rivalry with Ridley is suddenly fleshed out way more. It means you don't have to fill in as many blanks if the game does it for you. I don't care too much for fighting games. I don't want to say I dislike them because I'm a competitive arsehole and I enjoy that side of it. But I feel like there's only so much you can do sometimes with a fighting game, only so many ways you can go about to smack a gentleman. So when you do make a fighting game, you need to have something different, something special about it. Or you could just fill the entire character roster with Nintendo characters.
The gap between the first Smash Bros. Game and Super Smash Bros. Melee is so large that you could drive Zebus through it. And let's not forget how good a game the N64 Smash Bros. Was. At the risk of repeating myself, again, Nintendo took what they learned from the first Smash Bros. Game, supersized it, stuck it on a more powerful console, and sharpened every fine aspect from the N64 game. And what was left over was one of the greatest fighting games ever made, bursting at the seams with the creme de la creme of Nintendo characters, including many that I didn't know about before playing, and therefore helped to introduce me to those series. What really soaks up your time though is the variety. Admittedly, the root of nearly everything you do will boil down to you punching whatever the game puts in front of you, but I can't begin to tell you how long I've spent playing Adventure Mode, or spent learning how to beat level 9 CPUs. This was the first game that I ever played where I understood the competitive merits of it. Of course, I never did play it competitively because people are far better than I ever was, but I've never approached a fighting game in the same way since, including Brawl and Smash Bros. 4. Didn't need to buy dozens of amiibos to get the most out of this game. And now for the most obvious #1 spot ever featured in any video I've ever made on YouTube. I mean, come on, if it wasn't going to be Melee, of course it was going to be Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. I would feel incredibly dirty if it wasn't. It is, after all, my second favourite game of all time, and hands down my favourite Zelda game. Hey, I don't give two shits about things being obvious if I feel it's the correct decision.
In this video, I've talked an awful lot about the transition between the N64 and the GameCube. Suddenly, having this console with better graphics and higher processing power, you can make some great games now. But what people didn't expect was for Wind Waker to go in a completely different direction.
And yet the ironic thing is that while these cartoony graphics might not be hyper-realistic, they do achieve a sort of smoothness to the gameplay that the N64 could never dream of. If Ocarina of Time was the trial and Majora's Mask was doing something different, Wind Waker almost stands for what Nintendo were capable once they knew what they wanted to do with a Zelda game. Sure, it's not graphically very realistic, but if you overlook it because of that, you're missing out on the best combat system in a Zelda game, one of the most expansive overworlds in a Zelda game, arguably the best ever sense of adventure ever achieved in a Zelda game. And I don't know about you, but even if this game looked like a small child had thrown up on a TV screen, it would still be worth every ounce of your time.
This has been RabbidLuigi, and the best praise I can give Wind Waker was that when Nintendo announced in early 2013 that they were going to be remaking another Zelda game, the first Zelda game on the Wii U with better graphics, much better lighting, and more instinctive control system, it didn't need it.
Want to have a say on what I talk about next week? Leave a top 5 suggestion in the comments section below and go follow me on Twitter, where later in the week I'll be compiling the best submissions and setting up a vote over there. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that. Feels like a while since I've mentioned Wind Waker in a video, and even though I've done a Let's Play on the HD version, I couldn't just use that footage because it's hardly the most authentic thing to be doing. But anyway, keep that torrent of top 5 suggestions coming in. You guys are absolutely crazy and I love it. And if you want to see my crazy, Twitter and Facebook get pretty crazy at times. You know, every sort of like 2 out of 3 or so. I don't know, it's funny.